I have been present in the aftermath of many a disaster and present once or twice whilst disasters were happening. But nothing prepared me for the situation in Gaza. First of all, it's like an earthquake zone. The difference being, if it had been a real earthquake, all the governments in the world would be airlifting the means of rebuilding the country and rescuing the victims of the earthquake. But because they're only Palestinians, and the earthquake was a man-made political earthquake caused by Israelis, not only are they not airlifting in the relief that's necessary, they have collaborated to besiege the territory to punish the Palestinian people for voting the wrong way. And the devastation, which was really considerable, 61,000 homes destroyed in 22 days. I don't know, the population here is 100,000, yeah? In Gaza, it's 1.5 million. But the area of Gaza is 25 miles long and 2.5 miles wide. So please place that in your minds and imagine what 61,000 demolished houses in 22 days looks like. In the middle of a bitter winter, by the way, 61,000 Palestinian families, mashallah, they have big families. That's 250,000 people were living in the rubble outside in the winter time. And just by the by, virtually every other window in Gaza is broken by the blasts, but not a single pane of glass has been allowed to cross the border to repair those windows. So 61,000 families are cold outside and the others cold inside their houses. Schools, hospitals, clinics, other public facilities, police stations completely flattened and destroyed. Thousands of people killed, maimed for life. I don't like this term wounded, you see. Wounded's like in the cowboy pictures, you know, you have a sling and then a few weeks later the sling is gone and you're back to normal. When we say wounded, in the context of the bombardment in Palestine, we're talking about thousands of people dead and maimed for the rest of their lives. Hundreds of children orphaned in front of their eyes. The devastation was, well, awesome in the literal use of that word. The more so because if we had access to better than Fox News or the Bush and Blair Corporation in my country, then we were able to see it happening. If we had Al Jazeera, if we had Press TV, if we had access to the internet, through the internet, to the other sources of information, we saw the scale of the devastation. We saw the little girl from Zaytuna burned black by the sun because she'd lain out under the sun dead for 3 days because the Israelis said they would kill the ambulance men if they went into Zaytuna to rescue the dead and the dying. The little girl burned black, held up to the camera by the ambulance man when he finally recovered her, minus her leg and her arm eaten off by the dogs in the rubble of Zaytuna. Or the little baby girl found dead, still suckling on the toe of her dead mother. Keep these images in your mind, because this is what happened on our watch as we were watching just a few short months ago. But you know, even worse than the devastation, physical devastation, even worse than the loss of life, is the siege. And it's that I really want to touch you with tonight. This siege is illegal, it's immoral, it's un-Islamic, it is reducing the Palestinian people in Gaza to absolute despair. 80% of the Palestinian people are refugees. This means they're an international, legal, and financial responsibility. The United Nations is supposed to be feeding the 80%. In fact, because of Israeli restrictions through the checkpoints, the United Nations itself cannot get the food in to the refugees that they have a legal duty to feed. Why is this Israel still in the United Nations? Why isn't it expelled from the United Nations? It's bombing. It's in breach of more United Nations resolutions than all the countries of the world put together. It's bombing United Nations installations in Gaza on television. It's killing United Nations drivers as they drive food in for the refugees. And it's blocking the food that the United Nations is legally obliged to feed to the refugee population in Gaza. So even the 80% for whom the international community has a legal responsibility are not receiving their food. What about the 20% who are not refugees, who have no income and are literally starving? I've known the Palestinian people in Gaza for a long time. It was never a happy place, never a place that anyone really wanted to be. But now it's in a state almost beyond belief. But we arrived with this great convoy, and in a public square, in front of all the cameras, I declared that we were giving the keys to these 110 vehicles to the elected Prime Minister of Palestine. The elected Prime Minister of Palestine. Now listen carefully, because this is important. I am not myself a supporter of Hamas. I was for all the best years of my life and until the last day of his, a comrade, a confidant of the late President Yasser Arafat. And I remain loyal to him. I'm not myself a supporter of Hamas, but I am a supporter of democracy. And the only people entitled to choose the government of Palestine are the Palestinian people themselves. It's nothing to do with London or Washington, still less Tel Aviv, to choose who the leaders of the Palestinian people are. And that's why I gave those keys to the elected Prime Minister of Palestine, and that's why I'd do exactly the same again tomorrow if I had the chance. Now what are we asking for? It's important. There's two options. We could have two states with a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza, but it would have to be connected by a flyover or a tunnel. It would have to have an Arab border. There would have to be the demolition of all the Zionist settlements in Jerusalem and on the West Bank. We could have such a mini Palestinian state on 22% of the land of Palestine, as long as East Jerusalem was its capital, and crucially, as long as the right of every Palestinian refugee to return to their home was respected. We could have that, but I've got a better idea. Why don't we have one democratic state from the river to the sea, where the Jews and the Muslims and the Christians can all live as equal citizens under the law made by a democratic state? When Mandela was released after 27 years in the dungeons of the white settlers in South Africa, they begged him to give them one small piece of the country for a white country, for a white state. They called it, they wanted it in the Orange Free State. They said, please, you take the rest, just give us this one place. And Mandela answered, we don't believe in white states or black states. We just believe in democratic states, where every person is the equal of the other, and each has a vote to elect a government.